Saito and Akane have been at each other's throats for as long as they've known each other, and today is no different. Akane is yelling at him about something. He doesn't care enough to figure out what, and he simply tells her to leave him alone. Unfortunately, that only fuels the fire, escalating their argument even further. Hinamari, one of Akane's friends, walks over and watches the chaos unfold with amusement. She's always found it hilarious how these two can't go 5 minutes without bickering. Akane seems way too invested in Sato's every move, almost like she cares. The realization hits, and Hinamari can't help but voice her suspicion. Akane, absolutely disgusted, immediately shuts that theory down. She'd rather have a cockroach burrow into her ear than develop feelings for him. Saito, equally horrified, insists that dating Akane would be a fate worse than death. After a long day of school and senseless arguing, Saito heads home. His phone rings unexpectedly, and when he answers, his grandfather is on the line, inviting him over for tea. Saito has better things to do. He's not interested in wasting his time on some sentimental tea date with his grandpa. But Temiya Hojo, the man who single-handedly saved the Hojo group from ruin and built it into a global tech empire, doesn't take no for an answer. He reminds Saito that he's already named him the heir to his massive fortune. So the least the boy can do is spend some quality time with his dear old pop-pop while he's still breathing. Saito still isn't feeling it. But unfortunately for him, Temiya is well-versed in the art of kidnapping his own grandson. Moments later, a limo pulls up beside him, flanked by armed guards. Saito briefly considers making a break for it, channeling his inner track star and sprinting for his life. But then remembers that his grandfather is absolutely unhinged enough to have him shot and hospitalized. Deciding that getting in the car is the smarter option, he sighs and complies. As they drive, Saito asks where they're taking him. The guards, knowing full well their boss is a lunatic, apologize for the inconvenience. They explain that their orders are to bring him to a villa, but they have no clue what Temiya is plotting. Temiya Hojo, one of the wealthiest and most powerful men on the planet, built his empire from nothing. Despite his eccentric methods, there's no denying that he deeply values his grandson, though it's still unclear if that's a blessing or a curse. Meanwhile, Sato's father seems to care more about his obsession with milk than his own son. Eventually, they arrive at the estate. Saito, unimpressed, takes a seat outside to wait for his grandfather. Akane appears out of nowhere, and the first thing she does? Yell at him. She demands to know what he's doing there, to which Saito replies that his grandfather dragged him over. Turns out, Akane's grandmother invited her for tea as well. Now things are getting suspicious. Neither of them has any idea what's going on, but since they can't be in the same space without arguing, they start bickering all over again. Right on cue, Temiya and Akane's grandmother arrive, announcing that they have something important to discuss. They usher everyone inside, where a grand feast has been prepared for an occasion Saito has yet to understand. As he surveys the table, Saito notices that Akane hasn't even touched her food. Feeling mildly concerned, he asks if she's okay. Unfortunately, his moment of sincerity is wasted. Akane shoots him a glare and declares that his hideous face completely destroyed her appetite. The two immediately start arguing again, much to the amusement of their grandparents, who watch with nostalgia, reminiscing about their own heated exchanges back in high school. Saito, already at his limit, pinches the bridge of his nose and demands to know what this whole charade is about. Without missing a beat, the elderly duo drops an absolute bomb. Saito and Akane are getting married. The room goes silent. For a moment, Saito and Akane are convinced they must have misheard. There's just no way these two fossils are seriously suggesting marriage, especially since they're still in high school. But as it turns out, Tenryu and Chiyo are dead serious. And the explanation? Somehow even worse. Tenryu and Chiyo have known each other since childhood and were once deeply in love, but thanks to a series of petty arguments, they drifted apart. They both went on to marry other people, living separate lives, until time did its thing and both of their spouses ended up 6 feet under. Free from their past baggage, the two reconnected, rekindling their romance. They've decided to live out their lost love story through their grandkids. Akane is mortified. Marriage is something that should happen out of love, not because two senile old bats want to live vicariously through them. To make matters worse, Chiyo has the audacity to tell Akane she'll be expecting a full report on what Sato's backshots feel like later. Saito, still processing the sheer absurdity of the situation, points out the obvious. It's literally illegal to force minors into marriage. They can't possibly make this happen. But Tenryu has been playing this game for far longer than they have. He was expecting resistance, which is why he came prepared with blackmail. With a simple gesture, the doors swing open, and the ultimatum is revealed. Either Saito marries Akane, or the dog dies. Saito blinks. That's not his dog. He genuinely has no emotional investment in whatever random mud his grandfather is using as a hostage. But Tenryu isn't done. If Saito refuses, he'll be completely cut off, disowned, removed from the family registry, and most importantly, erased from the will. That gets Sato's attention. Now suddenly marriage to Akane isn't looking entirely off the table. But Akane is still firmly against it. Chiyo calls Akane over, leaning in to whisper something in her ear. Whatever she says must be serious, because Akane instantly stiffens. Tenryu lays down the final condition. They have 3 days to make a decision. Then, just like that, the two elders zoom off, no doubt, so Tenryu can continue his regularly scheduled back-blowing duties. Once their grandparents are gone, Akane turns to Saito, asking what they're supposed to do. But for once, neither of them has an answer. Getting Kiss 1 would be an absolute disaster for Saito, but before he starts panicking, he needs to understand just how bad things really are. So, he asks Akane about the threat her grandma made, wanting to gauge the severity of her situation. Akane, however, immediately gets defensive, refusing to tell him. It's a private matter, and there's no way she's about to spill her personal business to him, of all people. Later that night, Akane lies in bed, her mind racing. No matter how hard she tries, she has never managed to surpass Saito. What infuriates her even more is that he doesn't even seem to try, yet he still comes out on top every time. It's unbearable. Frustrated and needing advice, she calls Himari, explaining her totally hypothetical situation, being forced to marry someone she absolutely cannot stand. Himari is baffled, wondering how stuff like that still happens in this day and age. Akane then flips the question on her, asking what she would do in the same situation. Himari doesn't hesitate. She would refuse without a second thought. She already has someone she likes, and there's no way she would marry anyone else. That catches Akane off guard. She never knew Himari had a crush, probably because Himari had never mentioned it before. Or maybe, just maybe, Akane never bothered to ask. Naturally, Akane demands the details, but Himari keeps the guy's identity under wraps for now. She hasn't confessed yet, though she does admit that he's someone from their class. After talking about Himari's love life enough for one night, the conversation takes a turn. Himari asks Akane if she is in love with anyone. Akane doesn't even need to think about it. She's never had the time or the patience for romance. Right now, the only emotion she feels is an overwhelming hatred for a certain someone. Since Akane doesn't have a crush, Himari suggests that maybe it wouldn't be so bad if she just went along with what her grandparents wanted. Think about it, assuming this hypothetical husband isn't a serial killer, they could just live together, split rent and bills, and save a ton on living expenses. Meanwhile, back at his house, Saito is in full-blown panic mode. It's bad enough dealing with one candidate constantly breathing down his neck at school, but if they actually get married, that means he'll be stuck with her relentless nagging forever. His cousin, Shiz, immediately picks up on his distress and asks what's wrong. With a heavy sigh, Saito spills everything. How their grandpa is threatening to disown him if he doesn't comply with his ridiculous demands. Shiz doesn't even blink. Yeah, that definitely sounds like something their grandpa would do. She asks what he plans to do about it. She's perfectly fine if he decides to walk away from the company. Even if he ends up broke and living under a bridge, she'll still love him just the same. But she also knows that Saito has big dreams. Dreams that will never become reality without access to the Hojo group's resources. Whatever he decides, she promises to be by his side every step of the way. And honestly, that means everything to Saito. 3 days pass, and both Saito and Akane meet with their grandparents, ready to deliver their decisions. And just like that, they announce that they'll go through with the marriage. But, of course, their grandparents aren't satisfied with just that. Saito and Akane assumed they had some time, maybe at least until graduation, before they had to make anything official. But Tenryu and Chiyo have other plans. They expect their grandkids to start living as a married couple immediately. Before either of them can argue, they're shoved into a brand new house that their grandparents generously arranged for them. And then, just like that, Tenryu and Chiyo speed off, leaving them behind. Akane immediately freaks out. She can't just suddenly live with Saito like this. Meanwhile, Saito, who has built up a resistance to his grandpa's insanity, barely reacts. At this point, nothing surprises him anymore. Still, as they step inside, they have to admit the house is really nice. Fully furnished, stocked with everything they could possibly need. If Akane didn't have to share it with him, she might have actually enjoyed living here. But then they notice a problem. There's only one bed. Immediately, they call their grandparents to complain, only to find out that this was very intentional. Their grandparents demand that they sleep together in the same bed every single night. And just to add insult to injury, Chiyo wishes Akane luck with the inevitable pounding she's about to receive. Saito quickly puts 2 and 2 together. If their grandparents were crazy enough to force them into living together, then they were definitely crazy enough to set up hidden cameras to spy on them at night. Which is, highly illegal. While Saito is busy worrying about illegal surveillance, Akane is far more concerned about the other nightmare scenario, sharing a bed with him. Hesitantly, she asks if he really intends to do it tonight. Saito has no idea what she's talking about. Just to be safe, she threatens to stab him with her comically large pencil if he even thinks about trying something. Then, she sprints out of the room. For now, they still need to unpack. Akane carries her stuff upstairs. Saito, being mildly considerate, asks if she needs help. Akane immediately rejects him. Except after taking just a few steps, she loses her footing and falls backward. Saito catches her just in time. She's completely fine, uninjured and unfortunately, still alive to keep annoying him. He sighs and tells her to be a little more careful because if she does end up dying, he's going to be the prime murder suspect. Once everything is unpacked, Saito finds a meal their grandpa left for him. He warms up the pizza and is about to dig in when he notices Akane hovering nearby, clearly catching a whiff of the food. She's starving but too stubborn to ask for a slice. Saito sighs and gives her a piece anyway. She snatches it from him without a single word of thanks and immediately leaves. Saito wonders if this is what it's like to feed a stray cat. A few minutes later, he's ready for bed, so he heads to the bedroom, lays down, and closes his eyes, only to immediately remember that Akane is supposed to sleep here too. Akane walks in, equally tense. They already agreed that nothing is going to happen, but knowing that doesn't make it any less awkward. Saito quickly realizes there's no way he's going to fall asleep like this, so to distract himself, he starts a conversation. He asks Akane why she agreed to the marriage in the first place, but Akane refuses to answer. This whole thing is just a formality to her. She's only putting up with it for the sake of her dream, even if that means following their grandparents' weird rules. And that's when it hits Saito. If their grandparents can arbitrarily make up rules whenever they want, then it's only a matter of time before they decide to make a rule about having kids. Akane freezes as the horror sinks in. Oh my god, you're right. In her panic, she shifts too suddenly, and in the process, Saito accidentally touches her. But cue yet another fight breaking out.